Hi, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV. And who wants some more Normandy stuff? We all want some more Normandy stuff. And we're continuing our occasional series of studies of the German Widerstandsnest along Omaha Beach with regular guest filmmaker and artist Mike Akkerman. And his previous appearances on World War II TV are in the description below. So I'll bring him in now. How are you today, Mike?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Paul.
So, as we were just saying, that the depth of knowledge about Omaha keeps expanding, and it's a subject we kind of feel we kind of had put to bed 50, 60 years ago, but in fact we haven't. You're doing the work on the bunkers. Niels is in the sidebar, is still looking at German units in Normandy, and indeed they're still uncovering stuff about the US Navy. People are uncovering stuff about the air plan. It's crazy, really, that there is still stuff to be said about a beach that has been written about so much.
Oh yeah, I know, absolutely. Well, it is funny because like I do with all the stuff that I do with Omaha Beach. It's funny, Niels, he and I was just going back and forth with him, earlier today, even talking about certain things. He knows so much, and he came out with a new book, which is awesome. And I pick his brain all the time, but about this stuff. But so yeah, we're all working together is basically what I'm saying. But no, it is absolutely true that there is so much stuff that isn't known. And with all my stuff that I post about Omaha Beach, I sometimes will see casual viewers say stuff like, "Oh, I want to hear more about Sword Beach," or this and that. I was like, "Hey man, look, there's a whole other thing out there for you to research if you want." But like, there is still much to be had for something as famous, as I should say, as Omaha Beach. So yeah, there is always stuff to uncover, stuff to learn. And, I feel like I haven't even really, I'm not even close to being done researching.
Yeah. Your microphone is still breaking up a bit, unfortunately, Mike. I don't know what we're using that was different from last time, but
does it sound terrible right now?
Doesn't sound awfully terrible, but it was definitely going a bit crackly again.
Okay. I'll try my best to try and move it forward a little bit. Yeah, this microphone, my friends tell me, it's terrible, and I know it is. So, but I'm sorry. Does it still sound bad?
It was a bit better that time.
Okay, I'll try not to move. I feel like when I don't move too much, then it does pretty well.
That's definitely better.
Cool. All right. So I see you have my PowerPoint pulled up here. So yeah, today, in terms of Omaha Beach, we are covering the Réseau des Moulins Valley, which is also known as Exit E3, and it is part of Colleville-sur-Mer. And in terms of the German nest, it was called Stützpunkt Colleville because it was part of a broad, area of resistance nests. So this is going to be one of the more famous parts of Omaha Beach. I think WN62 is by far the most covered. However, there's still a lot of stuff to learn about it. So, for people who want to know some really detailed stuff, let's get into this. So, as we've done before, when I've been on these shows to cover, Omaha Beach, I kind of like to pull people into exactly what we are talking about, even if you have seen the previous episodes. So here's Omaha Beach from a contemporary aerial photograph, a satellite photo. And these are all of the sectors broken down, all of the American sectors, and each part of this beach was covered by a German Stützpunkt, which is made up of several little resistance nests, and those make up a single area of basically a base. All of these points of resistance make up a Stützpunkt. So Stützpunkt Colleville, this right over here, is what we're going to be focusing on, and this area right in here is the Réseau des Moulins Valley. And that is what we are going to be focusing on. Here is the valley, again, from a present-day photo, aerial photo. We have the cemetery over here, which most people who have been there are very familiar with. And down here, we have Colleville-sur-Mer. And right here, we have the Réseau des Moulins Valley. And that is covered by 2 German resistance nests. So let's move in. This right here is an aerial photograph from August of 1942, before tons of, big constructions really started on this area. So this is, as far as I know, this is as far back as I can go when it comes to the aerial photos of Omaha Beach. Let's move in a little bit. I photoshopped out the crosshair that was part of the camera there. So this is the area in 1942, right as the Germans are starting to occupy the area. Now, when it comes to the Réseau des Moulins Valley, there were a number of houses there. Now, for the previous areas of Omaha Beach that we have covered, there are numerous houses, around Vierville. There were numerous houses around Saint Laurent, Les
Yep.
Moulins, which is that valley. But as you get more towards the east, the houses kind of diminish a little bit. There are not too many of them, but there were a significant amount of houses to begin with within the valley here. Again, seaside cottages for, vacation cottages for Parisians and stuff and such. So part of these houses was this hamlet over here called Le Quévet. And I think it's still called that today, actually. The Le Quévet neighborhood or hamlets right up there. And then farther inland here, if you go down the road, there was an old mill that was there, which I also think might still be there today.
That's still there. Yep.
Really? Nice. So here are some photos of the Le Quévet hamlet before the war. These are probably taken in the 19 teens or 20s. And as we can see, yes, it's very tranquil, beautiful seaside, cottages and such. Very, very picturesque. And, very popular and nice vacation places. Again, this beach was called La Plage d'Or, the Golden Beach. It was a very nice area. Now, unlike previous parts of Omaha Beach that we've covered in terms of the houses, these houses I have not really been able to find names for, most of them anyway. This house right here on the left was called St. Clair. That's what I was able to find. But these other ones here, I have not been able to find names for. So that is the difference when it comes to houses in the Colleville area, in terms of, going against the houses in Vierville or Saint Laurent that all have names attached to them. These ones, from what I have been able to find, don't have too many names attached to them. However, there is one house right here that I did find a name for, which was Le Rebellier. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that. I'm sorry. But that's what the name was that I've been able to find for it. And that's this big house right here in the center. Some great photographs of it. The owners here, the vacationers. Just a great place to be, for the summer. And then on the western end of the valley, we have other villas that I, again, have not been able to find names for. This one right here on the left here will become pretty significant. These other ones here, I have not been able to find names for, except for these ones way down here, but those are for a completely other video. These ones right here, though, I have not been able to find names for. So in the spring of 1942, the Germans finally start to arrive to set up their Atlantic wall, to really start to occupy the area, to put fortifications and, resistance nests and such up against the beach, to start the Atlantic wall. So at first, and we've gone over this before, Paul, in the previous episode, but when the Germans first established their resistance nests, they were not called what they were eventually called, which we know them as today. So the area that covered the Réseau des Moulins Valley was actually called Stützpunkt 27. And the resistance nests that were created were, WN27A, which is on the eastern side of the nest and eastern side of the valley. And you can see Le Rebellier, that house is still there. And the only thing that was built for WN27A was a Tobruk 58C for an MG34 machine gun. That was the first thing that they built for WN27A. Really the only kind of actually fortified position there was this machine gun nest. This is not a photo of the actual one. This is just to give an example. But this right down here, this is the actual Tobruk that is still there today. Obviously, when it was made, it would have been flush with the ground. But today it's been more dug up and you can see it. I think it's on private property now.
It's in front of the bar and the restaurant there, so you can actually kind of wander and see it. They kind of keep life jackets for the beach sports things in front of it, so you can kind of half visit it.
Huh. Interesting. So yeah, but and then moving on to the western side of the valley, we have WN27B, and as you can see, the western villa. That one villa that I said is going to be significant is still there, and they've decided to turn that into their canteen, basically. Like the Germans who are in this area, they're going to use that as their house. So, one second. The only thing here that they do in this time are pour 2 circular concrete platforms to support some artillery guns. And those are also still there today. If you visit WN62, which I would say it's probably the most visited resistance nest of Omaha Beach today, you can still see these things there, these circular gun platforms that would support these guns. Okay, so the German units that occupied these nests that were sent there in 1942, we usually associate, 716 and 352 and such, but the first German units to actually occupy these nests was the 323rd Infantry Division. I have not been able to find any photos of this division in Normandy or any place else, but what I have found out is that when they were finally relieved in March of 1942, they went to the Eastern Front and they suffered so many casualties that the unit was dissolved. It just completely, just dissolved it basically. So that's what happened to that division, but I have not been able to find photos of them actually in Normandy at the time. The division was then replaced by the 716th Infantry Division, which we know now is the static infantry division that was there, and specifically Grenadier Regiment 726. And this photo right here on the right shows a number of men from Grenadier Regiment 726. So one thing I also wanted to mention here is that when it comes to Omaha Beach, we tend to really think of some of these buzzwords like Colleville and Vierville, like Vierville covered Dog Green Sector, infamous. Colleville had WN62, infamous. So you hear Colleville, Vierville a lot in association with Omaha Beach. However, leading up to D-Day, the epicenter of the whole thing was Saint Laurent, which I consider to be the forgotten town of Omaha Beach. And as you can see in this map here from 1942, everything branches out from Saint Laurent. All of these lines are communication lines that go off to all of the different nests. It's not Colleville. Here's Colleville right here. So the epicenter really of Omaha Beach for the Germans and the French was Saint Laurent, not Vierville or Colleville. In fact, I've seen a lot of interviews with French civilians where they call the beach La Plage d'Or. They'll just refer to it as the Saint Laurent Beach. To them, it's like that area is Saint Laurent. So kind of interesting.
Well, it makes sense because back in the day, that was the primary way for people visiting it to come down the road there. The D1 draw that so many tourists use now is only post-World War II because of people coming in on the loop from Pointe du Hoc and having been to Utah Beach. So the traditional way, the roundabout up further up in Saint Laurent where the Crémaillère restaurant is, that was the primary arrival point for tourists, and it was a primary arrival point for people delivering to the homes there and the people arriving. So that it makes sense that Saint Laurent would be the building block for everything there in terms of defenses, because it's the middle of the three villages, and it's the one that's connected to the road network.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just interesting that's that's how it was back then, but it's perceived differently today just because of the history associated with the other places around it. So very interesting. So in 1943 is when the renovations start to happen. Now, I've covered these in your previous episodes where the initial WNs that are made are finally reestablished with different names and different, organizations, and they start to rebuild them by pulling them back from the high, what's considered the high beach, which is right where the dune meets the shingle, and then there's the beach. That's called the high beach area. They start to pull the defenses from there up onto the plateaus. So in 1943, this map is from February 1943. That's when they finally start to reestablish this. And you can see in this map from February of 43, these nests already have their new designation. You have Stützpunkt Colleville, WN60 through 62, 61, 62, 63, 64, and 65. And this right here, obviously, is the Réseau des Moulins Valley. So Stützpunkt Colleville is established in 43. Now, this is from a series of aerial photographs taken in June of 1943. And I know I featured these on previous episodes because, this covers the entire beach. But we're going to look at the ones that cover the area that we're looking at here, the Réseau des Moulins Valley. And as you can see in June of 1943, the houses of Le Cavet, which are these right here, have been demolished at this point. They've blown them down so they can use their resources and provide fields of fire. They would compensate these people who own these places, but it wasn't much. So it was not good for them, obviously, but it was, they had no choice, they had no say in the matter. This right here, it's funny, that's the this is the St. Clair house right here, and that's its tennis court. That you can still see the fence is still up there, but the house is demolished. Now, one thing that's interesting about this photo right here is that what I is reduced. What I find really interesting about this photo is that you can actually, if you look closely, see the pattern of a freshly placed German minefield. And I like this a lot because it shows you how the Germans would place these minefields. You don't need to do these, these massive acres of mines. All you need is just this strip right here. This is like 4 mines thick, it looks like. Just this strip right here. And that acts as enough as a deterrent to keep anyone from climbing up there. You don't need this entire side of this thing to just be nothing but mines. This is good enough. So when it comes to German minefields in the area, it actually is more like this. And you can see some of these patterns in D-Day aerials as well, mostly at the rear parts of the WNs, where they just put these strips, and that's how you can really tell where the mines are. I mean, mines also can be multiple other places, but really it's an obstacle. It's meant to be a deterrent to keep someone from going up there or slow them down. So just an interesting thing. So as we continue west here, we eventually get to what is now WN61. As you can see, the house Le Rebellier is still there. This house that I've not been able to find a name for which is pretty much identical in terms of its layout, is also still there. So those 2 houses are still there. But as you can see, there are trenches here. They're really starting to, lay down the foundation of the WN. But what's interesting, though, is that, like I said earlier, when they started to redesign and reestablish these nests in 1943, the practice was to take a lot of the stuff that was down in the high beach sector, which again is this area right here, and move that back to the plateaus, move that up onto the escarpment. But they don't do that in this area, interestingly. They leave all of this stuff down here. I think it's just because the valley was so vast and they already had enough stuff down there that it was like, well, let's just utilize what we can here instead of trying to pull stuff back. And at this point, WN60 was established because that didn't even exist when Stützpunkt 27 was around. So really, they just thought there's really no point in pulling all this stuff back. So let's just keep all this stuff here instead of doing it how we're doing it with the other ones. So kind of interesting. Now the Tobruk 58C is still there, but another fortification that's added in 1943 is a ring stand 1694 for a KWK 38, L42 barrel, later upgraded to L60. Now I have talked about these guns a lot on your show. These were a very ubiquitous anti-tank gun that was used along the Atlantic Wall, everywhere, in Normandy. They really utilized these things a lot. It's basically the gun from a Panzer III taken out and just put on a mount, on a swivel mount. So that was added. Now, as we move in a little bit here, we can really start to see the details of WN61 coming to shape. And we can see the trench network has been laid, and a number of other things have been added here. Obviously, we have the Tobruk over here, and we have the ring stand over here. But we have a number of shelters that are added. Some underground shelters right here. Some of them are wood, some of them are concrete, some of them are stone. But then we also have the addition of a Wellblech shelter, which is just a sheet metal shelter for the troops to be housed in. That's not the one at WN61, but it's what it would have been like. Additionally, let's see here. Yeah, we have new MG positions that are added with munition sablage units right next to them. That's what those little concrete blocks are. You see that a lot in these machine gun positions that are along, excuse me, the trenches. You'll see like a little block next to it, and that is the munition sablage. It's the ammunition compartment. And they're like these concrete or wooden, usually concrete though, tiny boxes, and they would have looked like this right here. So we also have an added Tobruk that's meant to hold an APXR turret, which is a captured French turret. Now, when this photo was taken, there was no turret added to it, but it eventually was added. And this is the actual one right here. So that was on the very far eastern side of WN61. And then we also have the addition of a mortar Tobruk, which was the actual Tobruk itself was similar to an LC-125, but it was a bit smaller because the embouchure at the top was just a little bit smaller. So kind of a unique design. And this was meant to house what's called a Festungsgranatwerfer 210F. And what this mortar is, this is it right here. It's a breech-loading fortress variant of the French, I think, MLE 35 mortar. I'm not too sure about that, but the French made these to be used along the Maginot Line. And when the Maginot Line, when France fell, they took a lot of these things out of the Maginot Line and repurposed them into the Atlantic Wall. So you actually see the mortars aren't there obviously anymore, but when you look inside a lot of these octagonal Tobruks, you see these mounting configurations in there, and that's what that's for. It's for a breech loading version, 5-centimeter mortar. So kind of interesting. So, but this mortar, this Tobruk right here, was meant for that, but according to documents, it never got one. So instead, they used a captured Belgian Brandt mortar. And the German designation for that is Festung-Granatwerfer 210B. 210 or 210F is obviously French. 210B is Belgian.
Right.
So moving on. So also, anyone who knows WN61, this end of the beach, you are familiar with a massive concrete pillbox or concrete bunker that's at the very end there. That's still there today. And that was meant to house a PAC 4341 88 millimeter anti-tank gun. Now, when this photo was taken, obviously that didn't exist at the time, but as you can see right here, there is a position for an anti-tank gun still there. So the PAC 4341 was there, but it was not fortified yet. So we just had a trench leading to basically an improvised kettle pit almost for this gun, right before they finally decided to fortify it, and that's it right there. Okay, so that's WN61 in 1943. So going back to our aerial photograph here, we're going to continue west across the valley. Now,
I'm just thinking before we leave WN61, while you were talking about the fact they didn't pull that back to the plateau behind, I'm trying to kind of think of any other reason that they left it down below, and I'm wondering whether, if you've got the one to the left or to the east higher and then one to the west higher, having one down there nearer the beach, near, as you say, is maybe, if the enemy land, preventing them kind of gaining a bit of ground just off the beach. Maybe it's, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of some reason why. And also the access behind all that wooded area maybe have been difficult to approach for building. But I'm just kind of trying to wonder if there was any other reason, a benefit of leaving one position closer to the shoreline.
Well, I think one of the biggest factors in that is that WN61 is the counterpart of WN72. And WN72, which is on the complete western end of the beach, also has its casemates and its anti-tank guns down on the right on the high beach to cover the entire part of the beach. So I think with WN61 being the counterpart to WN72, they wanted to keep that big anti-tank gun down on the high beach as well, so it could also cover so it could double envelope the entire beach.
Makes sense. Yeah, good point.
Okay. So as we move on from WN61, and also an interesting thing right here is that you see this in photos leading up to D-Day, these little bridges down here that have these arches in them, to where these were originally for canals that they would let water into these valleys for old windmills and such like that. And you see a few of these, but this will come back to be important a bit later on. But we're going to continue west here, and as we fly, like how on this one, someone actually wrote Colville-sur-Mer on the photo. But now we have gone to the western side of the valley, and we are at WN62, the famous WN62. And this has been, expanded as well. There are trenches everywhere. There are additional positions and such. The villa, which I was calling the Western Villa originally, now I call it the Command Villa, because they have decided to, house themselves in the Germans have decided to use this villa as their command center, basically. The officers use it as a canteen. They have their kitchen there. They have, an office there. They have their radio comms there. So this is now going to be referred to as the Command Villa, and it stays there the entire time up until D-Day. So there it is right there. That's the only good photo I've ever been able to find of it. It's for being on such a famous part of the beach, it does not have a lot of information, unfortunately, that I've been able to find. So for WN62, we have those 2 gun platforms that I talked about. Those circular gun platforms are there, and now they're supporting 2 Belgian 75 millimeter guns. The German designation for these were FK235B. Again, B meaning Belgian. But yeah, 75 millimeter Belgian guns are now sitting on those 2 platforms, usually with camouflage umbrella over them. So here, and then also we have pillboxes added, machine gun pillboxes made of wood, mostly made of wood, along this forward network here. Oh, this is forward trench network here. This is kind of an example of what these would have been like, just logs, and they would have housed Polish WZ-30 machine guns, which is what this is right here. Again, this is a ubiquitous machine gun along the Atlantic Wall. After Poland, fell, took a lot of their guns, everything, and just wherever they could use it, they would. Obviously, the state-of-the-art stuff is going towards the Russian front. So for places like the Atlantic Wall that are, far from the front, we'll just use, excuse me, old captured stuff. So you see Polish machine guns, these what called the Polish WZ-30, which is a Polish copy of the American Browning M1917 machine gun, interestingly. And you see them a lot along the Atlantic Wall. So, 1 second, sorry. 1 second here, my thing is...
No worries.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. So another thing that is added in terms of machine guns is the Tobruk 58C down here. Now, interestingly, documentation that I found on this referred to it as an MG34 on a Lafette. Now, when people think of an MG34 on a Lafette, they usually think of just a basic tripod with the MG34 mounted on it. That thing where you pull the switch and it shoots, and it has the eyepiece and everything like that. However, for Tobruks, this kind of mounting configuration with these improvised shields is also referred to as a Lafette. And in aerial photographs, this specific Tobruk you can see it has this big lip around it, which they would have for these types of shields. So I do believe that this Tobruk, specifically at WN62, had this kind of MG34 in this shield configuration. That's how I've been able to discern that. Pretty interesting. So another thing that is added right in the center, which is something else that you see in a lot of these German resistance nests, is an anti-aircraft position, specifically a Zwillingsockel 36, which is 2 MG34s mounted in an anti-aircraft configuration, which is what you see right here. A lot of people, when they think of German anti-aircraft guns and stuff, they really think of like the Flak-Wheeler 36, 20 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. However, you don't see those a lot along the Atlantic Wall. You see more of this thing, interestingly. In terms of photos that I've seen of WNs, I see a lot of the Zwillingsockel 36 positions. Just this, simple configuration, 2 MG34s, and then in a dugout with revetted walls with sheet metal, corrugated sheet metal like that. That's how I usually see them placed. So that is how it would have looked at WN62 as well. And then also a half underground wooden barracks is added to the back of WN62. So we do see that. But that's eventually going to get demolished in favor of more fortified barracks and such. But in 1943, that is what the soldiers of WN62 were using, who were not in the command villa,
Yep.
All right. So another thing, too, is that, at this point, they're really, they've chosen that the Grenadier Regiment 726 is going to occupy this area, and they're really going to be the ones that are in control of WN61 and WN62, and specifically the German unit that occupies these nests is Company 3 of Grenadier Regiment 726. And again, these are a number of photos taken in and around WN62. And WN61 as well, just taken within the Réseau des Moulins Valley. And we can see a number of people who have been named here. Obergefreiter Bernhard Lumko, if I'm saying that right. He was actually one of the gunners, I believe, at WN61. I think, no, excuse me. He was part of WN63, which was just a command post on the outskirts of Vierville. He was one of the radio operators that was in that command post. So that's him right there in the center. On the far right is Unteroffizier Alfred Eberhardt. He eventually became the commander of WN60 on D-Day. He was not originally assigned there, but he was ordered to go there on D-Day. Here we have rifle practices around WN62. So we see a number of people from WN62 here. Gefreiter Michael Schnickels, Gefreiter Hans Zilbach, Unteroffizier Ludwig Forster. So these are a number of people that are part of WN62. This photo right here was taken at the front entrance of the command villa of WN62. And again, some more people of the nest right here. Unteroffizier Ludwig Forster again. Obergefreiter Peter Lutzen. Interesting, Peter Lutzen, he was the commander of WN62 leading up to D-Day. On D-Day, he was relieved of his command by Ludwig Pai, who came in from another nest to supply support. But Peter Lutzen actually was the main commander of WN62. And even though he was very young, he was an Eastern Front veteran. So as you can see right here, these two guys who are next to him, they're older than him, but Peter Lutzen actually has a Knight's Cross ribbon and he has an infantry assault badge on his uniform.
Yeah.
So he actually is a veteran. He's considered, a bit more hardcore than even some of these older guys right here.
And it's interesting, we were talking before going live, Michael, about the binary terms we use to describe German units. And obviously this is Neil's forte here, but in those photos of those defending troops, we can't necessarily draw any conclusions about their training or their ability or their motivation, but it's interesting that there is some pretty crappy old uniforms there. It's very much the jack boots and the early stuff and the kind of the light pattern, working overalls. It's not your kind of your Fallschirmjäger 1944 camouflage smocks and ankle boots and anklets and wear a canvas gear. That one there, that's very much kind of the 1930s, early 40s stuff, isn't it? Really?
Well, I was actually going to get into that in a bit, because that is a really interesting thing that you see with these guys. Like the guys with the lighter pants here, those are called oatmeal drillick pants, and those are from the 30s. Those are the 20s and 30s. They're the white working man's trousers. Now, if a German soldier is in combat, mostly he would put on his wool uniform. When he's working, though, like if he's building stuff, he's going to wear what's called his drillick uniform, which is what you see most of these guys wearing right here, like this. Without any pockets or insignia on the front here. These are called drillick uniforms. But these white trousers that you see, those are pre-war. They're called oatmeal trousers. So you do see a lot. And this guy right here is wearing an old Reichstunic from the 1930s. Repurposed into the Wehrmacht. You can tell because of the number of buttons. Pockets are placed. So absolutely, you do see a hodgepodge of repurposed stuff. Old stuff, and it's.
It makes absolutely no impact really on their fighting ability or prowess. I'm not making these comments to say, it proves anything. I'm just saying it's just people make statements about these German units based on, as Niels is going to be always talking about, secondary sources. But it is just one of the things you can actually tell from photographic evidence is they're wearing a variety of uniforms. What people then do with that information is up to them, but I'm just saying you can identify some fairly early stuff there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I find that stuff really interesting. I love seeing that sort of thing. This right here is a photograph again taken at the command villa, and we have a number of people here. We have Gefreiter Ludwig Kwiatkowski, if I'm saying that right. Gefreiter Theo Kowalski. Right here in the center, we have Sanitätist Obergefreiter Bruno Wittber. And he was one of the medics at WN62. Probably the only medic I've been able to unsurface from only German medic I've been able to find. Is they call them in German Sanitäter, and so that he's the only Sanitäter I've been able to find within the German units along Omaha Beach. Gefreiter Alois Rekas, he was one of the gun crew at WN62. Again, we have Peter Lutzen right here, and then Gefreiter Hermann Gotch, who was part of the crew of the PAC 4341 at WN61. So pretty cool. And this is kind of a more famous photo. You may see this one pop up online a few times. This is also at WN62. This is actually on that gun platform. You can see right here. You can see this concrete platform that Belgian 75 millimeter gun is sitting on. And we have, again, gunner Alois Vekes, another gunner, Gefreiter Hans Ziebach, and then Obergefreiter Bruno Plota. Interestingly, Paul, what you were saying about the uniforms, if you look at Hans Ziebach here, see the number of buttons on his jacket? This tunic is actually a Dutch tunic that has been retailored for the Wehrmacht. So when they would, when war broke out, they would take whatever they want. They would take old Dutch tunics and sew on collars that were like the Wehrmacht and give them the shoulder straps and all that stuff. But you can tell because the number of buttons and the pockets are different. So Hans Ziebach here is wearing a repurposed Dutch tunic, not the standard, what you would think M42 uniform or something like that. Alois Vekes right here is wearing the M42 uniform. But yeah, interesting to see just, again, the hodgepodge of uniforms and what the German army is doing to outfit its troops at this point. So this is the other 75 millimeter gun, Belgian 75 millimeter gun at WN62. Again, we have Unteroffizier Alfred Eberhardt here, Grenadier Franz Akkerman, Unteroffizier Ludwig Schulte, and these are gun crew guys right here. Obergefreiter Heinrich Kriegberg and Obergefreiter Valentin Lehmann. So these are members of the gun crew. These unidentified guys are thought to be previous units that were there, that were part of the gun crew before 1943. And then this, of course, is another photo that you see a lot online. We have, again, we have Kriegberg right here. We have Ziebach with his Dutch tunic. We have Alois Vekes, Bruno Plota again, Emil Drews, who was also wearing a repurposed Dutch tunic, Alfred Lehrmann right here, and then the famous Franz Gockel right here on the right, who was a German machine gunner at WN62. He went on to, write about his experiences. He was in a lot of interviews. So if you look up WN62, chances are you're going to come across Franz Gockel. Okay, so in 1944, there were even more renovations going on. And this is an aerial photograph from May of 1944. So what they wanted to do is build big concrete casemates for these WNs. They have field guns at this point. They have anti-tank guns. They want to fortify them and build giant bunkers around them. So that's one of the things that they want to do for 1944. The other thing is dig big anti-tank ditches to cut the Réseau des Moulins Valley so armor coming off the beach can't easily get over. And then additional manpower is also needed within the area. So we're going to cover these three things next.
And it's interesting because it came up in the sidebar, Mike, about did the Germans expect tanks to come ashore on any of the invasion beaches? And one of the things, forgetting Heinz Severloh, which we've talked about in another show, is Franz Gockel does give some insight into what his unit were expecting, what they were being told, kind of on an updated basis about likelihood of this, likelihood of that. So, that we don't know much along the beaches generally about what your average German soldier was thinking, because that information doesn't survive to the kind of granular level that we would like. But we do have some insight from Franz Gockel about that kind of updated picture he, as a gunner there, is receiving.
Yeah, totally. So let's see here. All right. So again, this is May 1944. At WN61, what they want to do is build an R677 casemate. Again, the counterpart of the one at WN72. So that's what they want to do for WN61. And then for WN62, they want to build two R699 casemates for those Belgian 75 millimeter guns. These right here are my own blueprints of these casemates right here. So this one is the layout of the R677, and this one right here is the R699. So in order to make this happen, the Germans, the WN61 and 62, they're working together. So, and they're building these casemates at the same time in late 43, early 44. To make this happen, they build a construction railway that runs from WN62, the construction site right here at WN62, all the way east to the construction site at WN61. You get this nice U shape of this construction railway here, to where they can run carts back and forth, collecting items and going back and forth, collecting concrete and such. So that is one thing that you see that is pretty interesting about this area. And this is not the specific railway, but this is what it would have been like.
Yep.
So at WN61, the Scheit firm, the Scheit construction firm that was brought in by Organization Todt was assigned to build the R677, and they had a number of either civilian workforce. French Moroccans were a big one that would be brought in, but also just French civilians in general. They would just go to the neighborhood and say, "Hey, your son has to work for this day." Blah blah blah. I mean, they would pay them, but they did not have a choice in the matter. So the Scheit firm was in charge of the R677 at WN61. However, because they didn't have enough manpower, a number of German troops from Company 3 of Grenadier Regiment 726 were brought in to also help build. And interestingly, Theodore Brinkbaum, who was one of the gunners at WN62, he was a stonemason in civilian life, and he was brought in to actually be in charge of the German soldiers who were helping build the R677 at WN61. So kind of an interesting note there. So the R677 at WN61 was scheduled to be completed on April 25th of 1944. They didn't meet that deadline, and it was instead completed on May 8th of 1944. So right as this aerial photograph was taken. The only other additional thing about WN61 is that they built a 3-room Feldmassig shelter. A Feldmassig is just a type of German shelter, and so that could house the men of WN61 here. They also at this point had demolished the house Le Rebellier, and they kept the basement though as a shelter and basically a barracks for the gun crew of the KWK 38. So both of those two houses, Le Rebellier and the other one, have now been demolished, but the basement of Le Rebellier is still there, and it's being used as a shelter. So this is my own map of WN61 right here that shows some more of the details, and we can go into some more stuff later on. But so this is part of my own map of the area right here that shows more of the details, where you can see the R677 here. There's the KWK 38 in the ring stand position. That's the basement of Le Rebellier, Feldmassig, APXR turret, mortar Tobruk, machine gun positions. So that is all of the laid out spots of WN61 right there, with the ring perimeter of barbed wire as well. So now moving on to WN62. The main construction site for WN62 was right here, a bit farther inland from the shingle, which is right here, and that railway track ran along this, curved inward, and the actual stop for it was right in this area. So this in here is a huge construction zone. You have little sheds, a ton of tree limbs along this road right here. So that's the main construction site of WN62. Now, interestingly, they pitted two construction firms against each other to build the two R699 casemates at WN62. So the lower one was built by the Bonelson construction firm, and then the top one was built by the Bliss firm. And if you look at both casemates, even though they're the same layout, they are slightly different because of this. They're just slightly different. The Bolizin one, the enfilading protective wall is slightly a bit thicker than the Blessed one. So kind of an interesting detail there. And then one of the key things to make all this work is that down here on the shingle, right next to the railway line, they put in a concrete mill supported by two concrete blocks on a conveyor belt. They can easily take all of that shingle that's down there and put it into this thing and make their own concrete. It's a really quick way to do it, but it does not produce the best concrete, unfortunately, for them. Yeah, it's just using sand and shingle. It's not the best way to make concrete, but they had to do what they had to do. And today, when you visit WN62, you'll see two giant concrete blocks kind of out on the beach. One of them has a plaque on it. It's referred to as raised rock, which is a whole other story.
Yep.
And those two pieces of cement are the blocks that were supporting the concrete grinding mill. They were originally have been on the shingle, really tight, close to each other to support that thing. Once the Americans took over the area, they pushed those things down onto the beach. So that's why they are there today and not back up on the shingle where they.
And I wish there was more information on Omaha Beach explaining that although it is German concrete, it's not from the defenses, it's from the construction of the defenses. Because the amount of times I've heard people say, "Oh, this must be part of an anti-tank wall or a bunker or something." And no, it is German, yeah, but not for that. And because they use it as kind of an illustration of the depth of German defenses, where I use it as an illustration of how shit their construction's got, as you said there, Mike, is that they're now trying to bring, beach sand, which is inherently not as good as proper construction sand, because beach sand, I'm going to go in my kind of nerdy stuff now, it's all washed smooth. The sand grains are rounded compared to the jagged stuff inland. You don't want rounded sand. You want jagged sand. So when you make cement and concrete out of it, it strongs and binds together better. And also the salt in anything you get off the beach means when you mix it with steel, which they're doing for the rebar and the other parts of the bunker, is you're creating bunkers that will eventually rot from inside. Now, they may be not worried about that because that's kind of a long-term thing rather than a short-term thing. But I use it as an illustration of just their inability to do decent stuff compared to 2 years later. And we've talked about this before, Mike. But so it's just worth reminding ourselves that the Germans are stretched by 1944.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it is funny because with a lot of these tow brooks and the casemates themselves, I mean, they would cover the embouchures with steel and things like that and wood to keep that seawater from coming in. Yeah, so just think of the fact that how damaging that seawater is to the fortifications themselves. But when you're making concrete that already just has the minerals of all that stuff is already built into it, yeah, it's not going to work very well.
And people are saying in the sidebar that, of course, they're not thinking about 50 years later. But even at that time, if you were to have a wall that had been built in 1942 with proper construction, sharp sand, and a wall of the same thickness built with beach sand and all that stuff, I'm sure that if you fired ordnance at it from a certain distance, the earlier bunker would survive that impact better than the latter, but because of, just as I say, that binding quality of the cement and the fact they're making it under pressure, they're rushing it, and we could talk about the fact that the quality of the workers is dropping as well. But we're going down a whole rabbit hole of the fact that they're taking away defenders from training to deal with an invasion to actually make concrete. Look at Utah Beach and Arthur Yanker up there, who's spending half his time actually overseeing the unloading of concrete when he should be reminding his men how to shoot enemy soldiers when they land.
Right, exactly. One, and then also another thing to consider is that they're not even using poured concrete at this point. They're using breeze block.
They're using the blocks. Yeah.
So it's not even as an effective way, they would have liked anyway. So, but that's what they did. That's what they had to do. And so that's one of the big things about WN62 is you hear about the concrete mill that was down at the shingle. A lot of people think that because of the placement of the concrete of raised rock today, that's where it originally was. No, those two blocks would have been up on the shingle originally.
Yep, they're moving.
And when the Germans, or when the Americans got there, they had to get their vehicles up that road right there. They bulldoze those things to the side so they get all the vehicles through.
Yep. Thank
you.
you.
Let's move on here. Okay, now one really interesting thing about WN62 is that you have those two casemates for the 75 millimeter guns facing west, covering the western end. However, the eastern side of WN62, at first anyway, does not have any kind of anti-tank or artillery guns on it. However, in 1943, or late 1943, early 44, two KWK-38 L-42 guns are employed or deployed, or whatever, are put there at WN62 in open positions. and this is one of them right here. And they're put on the eastern side of WN62, facing the valley right here to cover the valley. Now, one interesting thing though that when you look at these aerial photographs and you look at different aerial photographs from different times during dates, different dates and such like that, is that you can see that these KWK-38 guns are here in these little positions, but they're not in any kind of fortification. However, the very last aerial photographs of this location here, May and June of 1944, you actually see the outlines of R667 casemates. What they were starting to do is clear these areas to build R667 casemates for these KWK-38 guns. Now, the R667 casemate, that type of casemate is what is there at WN65 today. And again, anyone who's visited there knows that specific bunker. It's been preserved pretty well. It's in tons of photographs. That type of bunker, they were going to make 2 of those for WN62 to cover the eastern side of the nest, to cover the east, to cover eastward like that way. So yeah, you have the 2 that are already built in 1944 on the west, but on the east they were planning on putting 2 R667 casemates. So a really interesting thing. And then this is my own map of that area right here. As you can see, there's the first KWK-38 and there's the second one right there, linked by these 2 trenches right here. All right, so additional things that are built for WN62, not just the casemates, but they also put in 2 more Tobruk's for Festungsgranatwerfer 210 mortars. Again, that's that breech-loaded mortar. They actually did put these in WN62. Bruno Plota, who I mentioned earlier in some of those photos, he actually manned one of these on D-Day. So they put those 2 mortar Tobruk's in WN62. And then at the rear of the nest, they added a few different things. They added a Veldblech shelter, an underground Veldblech shelter for the troops of WN62. They destroyed that wooden barracks thing. They didn't need it anymore. So they put that in at the back of WN62. They also put an interesting, unique Tobruk, which is classified as BF69 Tobruk. It's a mortar Tobruk, but it also has a machine gun position or an observation position on it. So it has 2 embrasures on it. It's kind of interesting, but that is still there today. You can go back and see that. However, that never held anything on D-Day. The weapons for that never showed up, so that thing was just empty on D-Day. This right here is your contemporary photos, obviously. That is that BF69 Tobruk back here. This right here is the entrance to the Veldblech shelter. And then way back here is an interesting little thing, which is a bunker with a tiny slit in it facing the town of Colleville with a Litzsprecherrat 80 light device, communications device in it. And that was aimed at the bell tower in Colleville, so they could talk back and forth from WN63 to WN62. And how that device works, from what I've been able to unearth about it, is that it is like a radio, but it also can be used as like a Morse code, where it'll it'll flash light at one device, but only the device can see it. The human eye can't see it. So that was there at the rear of WN62 in this little thing right here. And Peter Lutzen of WN62, he was actually manning this thing on D-Day. So that's then, again, my own map of the area that shows more of the details. You can see the Tobruk's, the Feldbasig, the Tobruk right here, and then, yeah, that little bunker. And then this right here is a comm line that would have been running. All right, so the other things that they want to do in 1944 is add the anti-tank ditches. It's one thing to build these. It's another thing to actually fill them with water, and that's what they really want to do in terms of making these a really difficult thing to get around, is to fill them with water, make this giant ditch. Now, they can easily dig these things with excavators, and that's what they would have done to dig these giant trenches. But how do they fill them with water? Well, remember earlier when we were looking at the 1943 aerial, we see this little this little niche right here that would allow water in. So they utilize these things to fill up these anti-tank ditches. So they would dam off this area right here. Let's see if I go next door. Yeah, they would dam this area right here, and then they would dig their anti-tank ditch, dig this canal right here, as you can see, that led from the beach into the anti-tank ditch. They would open that dam once you got to the high tide. Once the beach was at full high tide, they would open that dam, and it would fill the entire ditch with water. That's how they were able to do that. So they're utilizing the ocean at this point to fill up the ditches. Yeah, that's another thing that, I mean, when I first started my research, I was like, how do they fill up those ditches with all that water? They just take a million people take buckets or something. I mean, how do they do that? So that's how they would do it. Is they would build a channel to the beach that's dammed off, and then once they're done digging it, it comes at high tide, they open it up, and the whole thing fills with water.
See, I would have thought they'd have taken water drained from the bluffs behind. So I always learn something.
I know, right? But as you can see it right here, you see that canal right there that's leading to that opening. Right
Your microphone's popping a bit again. If you kind of pull it out again or something, I don't know.
Sorry about that. Sound okay?
Yeah, let's give it a go.
Okay. So yeah, pretty interesting. All right, and then at WN62, we have another anti-tank ditch. This one is dry though, because they weren't able to get to the point where they could fill it up with water. And when it's this far inland, they might have used the water from inland to fill it up, but this was completely dry, and it was. I don't know if they ever wanted to wrap this entirely around WN62. Von Kuskin in his WN62 book that I have a lot of problems with, he lists an anti-tank ditch running along this area right here. I mean, you see a little indentation, but I think that's barbed wire. I don't think that is an anti-tank ditch. I've seen close-ups of this area in 1944. I don't see any kind of remnants of an anti-tank ditch. And with an anti-tank ditch, you're going to get this lighter area around here because it's the dirt that's been dug up out of it. So I don't buy his claim that there was an anti-tank ditch in front of WN62. This is the only anti-tank ditch at WN62 I've been able to see. All right, so then additional manpower. Now, at some point in 1944, in April of 1944, the 352nd Infantry Division moves into the area, and they start to reinforce the nest of around basically the whole coast, basically, and around that whole area of Omaha Beach. But Grenadier Regiment 916 of the 352nd comes in, and they start to set up camps and such, set up bivouacs in and around Colleville. This right here is a photograph of a training exercise taking place in Normandy. From Grenadier Regiment 916. And what's interesting is that at WN62, in aerials that are taken after April of 1944, you start to see the positions of Grenadier Regiment 916 showing up in and around WN62. And what you see are Panzerdeckung and Schützenschlag positions. Those are basically German slit trenches, what they classify as types of slit trenches. And you see these things popping up in aerial photographs after April. So this is the 352nd coming into the area and doing their whole thing, and again, this is more of like stuff that you would do in a field, not in a field along front lines and such, not necessarily in static resistance nests, or create these little tiny slit trenches here. And this right here is a diagram, the German diagram showing these different types of positions. You can spot them right here, these L-shaped ones. These are, they would create these L-shaped ones, put these either metal or wooden things over both sides, and two guys could hide under those if there was incoming fire or something. You see those pop up, and you see, this is the eastern side right here of WN62. You see more of those Schützenblock positions. And then you see MG Schützenblock position right here, that U shape. Here's a diagram for it. It's by the book.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see that stuff. That's the 352nd reinforcing the area. And then outside of WN63, this is a bit farther inland over by right outside WN63, which is right outside of Colleville, you see an entire trench network that's been built by the 352nd out here to guard this road for anything coming up this road. They're going to ambush the hell out of it. But with this trench right here. So, very cool. And then also reinforcing the area, you know, the 352nd have come in, and they brought their artillery with them. You know, they brought all their artillery batteries with them. So one of the big additions to WN62, and of course we've talked about this in our Heinrich Severlo episode, is the fire control position for Battery 1 of Artillery Regiment 352 at WN62. And what they do is they put in an observation post, a tiny concrete bunker with a slit embouchure. That's what it looks like, right? That's what it would have looked like. That's not the specific one, but that's what it would have looked like with the rabbit ears and the field phone. And the field phone would have been in there, and it would have run all the way back to the Feldmassig shelter back here that had a radio in it that was dialed all the way back to the battery in Hootville, Battery 1 at Hootville. This is a photo of one of the 105 millimeter guns right here in Hootville. And so they would have been able to, you know, they would have been able to sight the beach, you know, relay the coordinates, and then the battery inland would fire onto the beach. So that's one of the big additions to WN62. And of course, it also has a machine gun position. Again, we've talked about this in our Heinrich Severlo episode. That's a diagram of the specific type of MG positions that they would have used. And we've also talked about this, that, you know, the people who would have been using this would have been Oberleutnant Bernhard Frerking, who was the commander of Battery 1 of the Artillery Regiment, in Artillery Regiment 352, and then his aide, Heinrich Severlo. And Heinrich Severlo, obviously, he's the one who claimed to have fired the MG42 from this position right here. I don't entirely buy his story, but, you know, it's still up in the air in terms of what people want to speculate. But the fact of the matter is that these guys were assigned to the fire control position at WN62. And then that's part of my own map of the area right there. You have the observation bunker right here. There's the MG position, the crew shelter that was part of it right there. And then back here, the communications Feldmassig, where the field phone would be running down this trench into this. And then they would have a radio where they would relay everything back to Hootville. Okay, so now we're moving on to some photos here. This is May 19th, 1944. This is from a recon where American recon plane went along the entire coast and photographed all of the landing beaches. So this right here is WN62 on May 19th, 1944. We can see the Bonelsen casemate and the Blessed casemate are now there, obviously. They have their doors covering their embouchures, which is a common thing. They wouldn't just leave those open. We have the Battery 1 OP right here, Bernhard Frerking's OP right there. Tobruk 58C is there. There's the concrete grinding mill right there, the concrete mill down on the shingle. Wooden MG pillboxes, the Spillingzockel 36 is right there. As we continue in this series of photos, we can see more of WN62. There's the command villa, the KWK L42 right there. Wooden MG pillbox right there. That's the pillbox that Franz Gockel used on D-Day. So Franz Gockel would have been in that specific one right there on D-Day. The Spillingzockel 36 again, wooden MG pillboxes again. These would have also had Polish WZ-30s, just like Franz Gockel's machine gun bunker. Franz Gockel used a Polish WZ-30 on D-Day, not a MG-34 or 42. So that's pretty cool. Unfortunately, this series of aerial photographs, from this one, the next photo is WN60. It didn't catch a photo of WN61, unfortunately, so I don't have a photo of that from that series. But this right here is an aerial photograph of Réseau des Moulins, the valley, the E3 Valley, as it was called by the Americans, on D-Day right here. So we see a number of things smoking. This is, you know, combat has broken out. This is going to be a series of photographs taken on D-Day right here. So this is the Réseau des Moulins Valley as the Americans are approaching. We can see the two casemates of WN62 here. You can see the command villa. And then on the other side, you can see the Scheidt R677 right there. And it's kind of a famous photo. This one pops up a lot. This is also taken from the exact same vantage point here. We can see the R677, the command villa, which has its roof caved in at this point, as you can see, and then the two R699 casemates, the Bonelson and the Bless. This is actually a photograph taken on June 7th right here, but it's a good view of WN61. You can even see some of the remnants of Le Quebec are still there. Some of the destruction is still lying around, but that right there is the Shite R677 sitting right there. Excuse me. This is a photograph taken right in front of the Réseau des Moulins Valley that shows remnants of the railway construction on the shingle. You can see some of that right there, and then the lines of barbed wire right here. Some logs lying around from the construction crews. So the Americans, you can tell at this point, just plowed through this so their vehicles could easily get through it. But yeah, this track would have run all along this right here. And you can see the Shite R677 right over there. And then this is a photograph taken along the shingle again, right in front of the Réseau des Moulins Valley. What's interesting is that in this photograph, we can see the pickets right here, the barbed wire pickets that the Germans used. It's called the Hindersplittenpfeil, and 1 meter tall iron pickets that were buried, that had their bases buried, and the barbed wire was, laced through all of these loops and stuff, and that's how the Germans used a lot of their pickets, leading on these beaches. Not the log crisscross thing that you usually see. It would actually mostly have been pickets like this. It's called the Hindersplittenpfeil, if I can say that right. So this right here is sometime after D-Day. This is looking at WN61 here. This is the basement of the Rebellier right here, and it has dirt and stuff covering it, so people can't really see what it was, and you can fortify even more. There's the KWK-38 position right there. That's WN61, and then this is probably the best photograph you can find of the Shite R677 in 1944. After the Americans occupied the area. Well, what's interesting is that this bunker actually didn't last very long. The Americans took this bunker out pretty quickly on D-Day. It was hit by 75 millimeter rounds from tanks from the 741st Tank Battalion. And you can even see where, a lot of these rounds hit, bam, right there, and eventually they took the gun out that was on the inside, the Pack 4341 that was in there. Was eventually hit by an 75. But that's the back of the Shite bunker right there. Not a very good photo. I had to enlarge it. I've been trying to find a better version of that photo. But what's cool is that afterwards, after the Americans took over the position, they turned this bunker into a dentist office. And this is a photograph showing the inside of that dentist office. You can see dentists working on guys over here. So this...
all that thick concrete to muffle the screams.
Right. I'm sure it worked very well. But this is the only photograph I've been able to find of the interior of the Shite R677. And they took the gun out, obviously, at this point. You can see the hooks that are still, on the ceiling where they could hoist the gun on, but they had to take it apart. Pretty cool, though. And that's the Pack 4341 that was in that casemate after it was taken out. And if you look at the barrel, the muzzle brake has damage on it from that 75 millimeter round that hit it.
What's your opinion of whether or not that gun fired on D-Day?
It's funny because the only places I've been able to find that it actually fired is in von Kusken's book, but I rarely trust anything von Kusken says.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Yeah,
and so I believe that it probably did not, but I do believe that it was hit, and that's what took it out. By the 75 millimeter round. As you can see, this barrel is bent out right here. So whether it fired
when you read the accounts of Frank Stroini, who's attacking that position of WN61, there's the machine gun battalion with the kind of tripod mounted 50 cals coming ashore. When you put together all the accounts of people who are coming in that area, very few of them mention any kind of much in the way of return fire coming from anywhere from 61. Okay, that's different types of times of the morning, but I've always been a bit dubious exactly how active that position was.
Yeah, I don't think it was very active at all. one thing to think about also is that people, for some reason, like when they look at the damage that's on a bunker, if they see it in photographs or they see it in person, bunkers that still exist today, they immediately think, oh man, they silenced this gun or whatever like that. The Americans, they're going to shoot at whatever embouchure they can see. They don't care if actual fire is coming from that or not. Like if they're coming onto the beach and if they look over to the east and he sees a giant concrete bunker with a clearly open embouchure, I'm gonna fire into that thing. Like I'm not gonna take the time and wait until that opens on us. We're gonna hit it immediately. So you do see a number of positions on Omaha Beach or other places in Normandy in general, bunkers and such, that will have battle damage on them. But when you look into the actual story of it, it's like, oh, well, maybe no one was actually here or no one was actually doing anything here. But the Americans, they're going to shoot at it anyway. So
and it's that tendency to assume that the German response at one Widerstandsnest is going to be repeated exactly the same at the one to its left or right, because we know from other beaches that just because Unit A puts up a fight doesn't mean that Unit B will put up the same fight. You can't make the assumption that there's a consistency. And just like as you've been explaining over these shows, there's not a consistency with how they set up a Widerstandsnest, although they use kind of some standard design types.
Yes.
How they actually incorporate them varies, and how many people were in them varies, and what kind of performance they did on June the 6th varies. So there's lots of assumptions historians will make and visitors will make that, oh, well, look, 62 held out till X in the afternoon. 61 must have been similar. You can't always make those assumptions.
Yeah, not so much. The one thing that I have found out is, and this is kind of an interesting story, but what was his name? I have it somewhere in my notes right here. The actual guy who was in charge of the gun at this specific gun at WN61, his name was Schnull, and I've seen it in reports that it states that he was killed by that 75 millimeter round that came in and hit that gun. It's interesting though that in von Kuskens' book, he states that Schnull climbed on top of the R677 with an MG42, fired it at his hip like Rambo, and a 75 millimeter round came and atomized him into red mist, and that's how he died. And it's like that right there should just tell you how you shouldn't trust this guy, because that is such a bombastically ridiculous story. When you really look it up, it says, oh, because I think it's in Franz Gockel's memoir, if I remember right. It says, yeah, he was killed by the 75 millimeter round that hit the 88 millimeter gun in the bunker. It's like, okay, that's probably more likely what happened. Not that he climbed on top of the bunker, yelled like Rambo while firing an MG42 from his hip, and then a tank round came and burst him into red mist. Like, I don't buy that at all. So, yeah, different weird stories like that pop up sometimes. It's really difficult to find credible German stories regarding Omaha Beach. So take them all with a grain of salt. That's that same gun right there after it's been dragged out of the R677. This is sometime after the war, sometime in the late 40s probably. We see the back of the R677, and off to the left we see the APXR turret, the French turret right there on its Tobruk, still sitting there. And in the background here we can see that shelter that was right next to it, that the trench would have led through. Another photograph of the turret. No documentation at all whether or not this thing fired or how effective it was. But, I don't know. I see a lot of intact Panzer turrets, on Omaha Beach or other places after D-Day with no battle damage on them whatsoever. So maybe they fired, maybe they didn't. I don't know. Kind of difficult to say. And then that's another photograph of the turret. This is kind of cool. You can actually see the track, the track ends of the construction railway right back here. There is the KWK-38 at WN61. This was famously taken out by, I forgot the guy's name, but he fired at it with a bazooka, and that's what initially. That's
Stroine, isn't it? That's Stroine.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, he took it out with a bazooka, so that's what took this out. And you can see some battle damage on the blast shield here. Tons of spent rounds, within their cases sitting around. So this thing definitely was used. And then this is a post-war photo of the the KWK38, and then the R677 in the background. Moving on to WN62. This is a photograph taken from the shingle of WN62, or right, just to the west of WN62. Oh, and
Right.
okay, cool. And this is the road that eventually ran along. And you can see also right here more of those German pickets with wire fastened. And you don't need a ton of wire. You don't need just giant, massive spools of wire to really make it something that's a little bit difficult to get through. So usually when I see German wire along Omaha Beach, the wire itself is pretty fierce. It has barbs every inch or so, but it's not terribly thick in a lot of places. So this is at WN62. This is looking at that bend in the construction railway here. Obviously, this is after D-Day. That's part of the construction railway. It's still there. And an abundance of logs over here used to build obstructions on the beach. And a number of breeze blocks as well for building additional casemates and such. And that's that KWK38 L42 that was at WN62 on the eastern side that they were eventually trying to build a casemate for over here. You can also see more of the lines of barbed wire right through here, which is cool. And camouflage net over it, very typical, something like this. This is, again, the same gun. Americans have now occupied the area. And then this is part of the gun position as well. You can see the blast shield right here. This is looking up the plateau, strewn with crap now, American tents and such. I didn't really cover this, but in addition to the 352nd, with the 352nd coming into the area, they brought in a number of their anti-tank guns as well, and set up a number of these at the backs of the draws. There was one at the back of the E1 draw, and then there was one at the back of the E3 draw, the Réseau des Moulins draw. And this is one at the very back of WN62 right here. A series of photographs taken by someone who obviously wanted to get this GI, looking cool or something like that. Make it look like you're assaulting this position. So you get a few of the photographs.
Shall I fix my bayonet, sir? Yes, fix your bayonet for the photo, lad.
Yeah, that bayonet's going to look freaking awesome. Put it on, And yeah, so photo opportunity, definitely. But this is the improvised casemate for this Pack 40 right here from the 352nd that was at the very back of the valley. And some more photo opportunity here. 75 millimeter Pack 40. So, and that's inside the casemate itself, looking towards the ocean. And now we're going to the casemates here. This one is the Moulins, the lower casemate, the Moulins R699 casemate. What's cool is that you can see it has along the face right here a number of battle hits and a number of shells hitting this thing on D-Day. Has a lot of bitumen coating though on the concrete itself, so they can put dirt all over it. But bitumen coating, it's like tar, and they do that to make it watertight. And then also some camouflage paint above the embouchure right here. Some dot camouflage, which is pretty typical for German camouflage. Another image of the same casemate. This is inside it, looking at the back door right here. These are the ammo niches right here. And then that's the Moulins R699 after the war. And this is also after the war, but you can see that camouflage paint job is still on the back. So it's kind of interesting. Kind of an interesting camouflage technique. That is one of the 75 millimeter Belgian guns from the casemate that was wheeled out and thrown into the anti-tank ditch after the battle. The Americans are going to use these things. They don't need the bunkers. They don't need the gun in it anymore. So they just pushed it out and it fell down into the anti-tank ditch. So that's what we're looking at right here. And that's WN62 and WN61, the Réseau des Moulins Valley. The entire thing, and taken from an aerial photograph in May, and then my own map of the whole area with all the details we've already been looking at. As you've watched these shows before, I do maps, detailed maps of these areas. So, I have an entire detailed map on the whole thing. If you want, you can get this map right here with the legend on it that has everything, all the details that I've already gone over, and even more details. I didn't even cover the beach obstacles in front of it, but I do on this map right here. So yeah, I have my own map of this area that covers all of these details. And also, as a lot of you probably know, I'm also an artist. So, and with my research and my art, I mix both these together. This is a painting I just finished recently showing some of the German units that would have been at WN62 on D-Day. We can see in the background here, Franz Gockel's WZ30 pillbox back here. And we have Oberfeldwebel Ludwig Pai right here. This is my representation of him. I've never been able to find a photograph of this guy. But, he was the commander of WN62 on D-Day. And then Franz Gockel right here. And Franz Gockel, what he's wearing is his Drillich uniform in this painting, because he states in his memoir that he expected to do nothing but construction on D-Day. So he wore that when he went to sleep. And then when he woke up, D-Day happened. So he was wearing his Drillich uniform the entire day with his combat gear and all that stuff. And as we're talking about, different, out of date weapons and such like that, Franz Gockel here also, he does not have a K98 rifle. He has a Gewehr 98M, which is a Gewehr 98 from World War I that has been updated with a few K98, Kar 98K parts. And that's also a common thing that you see. In fact, the photo of Franz Gockel, after he completed basic training, he's holding a Gewehr 98M in his hand. So that's why I put him there with that instead of
pretty common in the static divisions.
Right, exactly. And then on the right there, we have the only German Sanitäter medic that I've been able to unearth at Omaha Beach, Bruno Wittber, and he's wearing again the repurposed Dutch tunic. You can see all the buttons in the different pockets, repurposed with German collar and shoulder straps. And again, another thing that you see a lot are these, repurposed tunics and such. So that's why I put those details in there. And some close-ups on this. The more I get into these things, the more detail I love to do. You can see in my maps or my paintings and stuff, I've just become an obsessive detail freak.
We haven't noticed, your detail is your obsessive attention to detail is not been noticed by anybody. It's still secret. Don't worry, we won't tell anybody.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, I just have it here on display for all to see. But I think the details are important. Ludwig Pai here, he's speaking into a field phone. That's another common thing that you see in these nests. They communicate to different positions with their field phones. They can carry those around. So Franz Gockel got shot in the hand on D-Day. Anyone who knows anything about Franz Gockel, he received a shot to his left hand on D-Day. And before leaving the area, he had someone bandage it up. So I thought it'd be perfect to have Bruno Wittber, the Sanitäter, bandage him up for my interpretation here of what some of these units at WN62 would have looked like. So, and then if you want links to my map that I showed, or if you're interested in prints for this kind of artwork or whatever, and I have more, you can email me at any time, theacker3@gmail.com. I've let people use my maps a lot for their research on Omaha Beach. So if you want links to my map, high quality copies of them, just send me an email and I will gladly let you have it for no price whatsoever. I don't think that that thing should be, those types of details should be, put a price tag should be put on them. I like to share them with everyone. And that's my presentation.
Well, brilliant stuff as usual, Mike. And people were asking early on about how many aerial photos the Allies were taking. We're not going to go down the rabbit hole at all about reconnaissance. But what's interesting is for you to put this information together. Yes, you have used those low-level aerial photos taken by the Allies and some of the Allied resources pre-D-Day, but then 2/3 of your photos have been American photos taken after the invasion. Then the last bit has been filled in with your knowledge of contemporary photos, people going there. And also, you've now spent when you first appeared on my channel, but at least 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I know you're not doing it 24/7, but you're doing it a lot. So now I'm trying to think about just exactly how much time the people interpreting the data off those aerial photos are doing back in World War II, because they haven't got, big 30-inch monitors they can zoom up on, and have a look at things. They're studying different sorties from different locations, probably on a daily basis. So they've got like a day to look at the defenses of Omaha. The next day, someone shoves them a folder of photos of Cologne to look at, and then the next day they look at something else. And it's an amazing testament that the Allies had built up, even though it wasn't a complete picture of the German defenses behind the beaches, that they had any kind of idea at all, really. I mean, most men coming ashore were aware of roughly what was ahead of them. There's a 5 centimeter over there, there's a so-and-so over there. You're going to find those big maps were fit for purpose, if not perfect, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It's bigot maps are, it's kind of interesting because for some reason, a lot of the American bigot maps still have the guns facing towards the sea for some reason. That's the one thing that I notice about almost all of them. But aerial photographs I find to be really key, into studying these things. And as long as you can get a high quality version of them, that's the key. So you can really, research the hell out of it and see what exactly, the cameras were able to capture. Aerial photographs, and then the photographs that are taken by Americans after D-Day, I find to be the best sources. Unfortunately, you don't find a lot of German photos. I've shared a number of German photos.
The photos that Gockel and others had are, in terms of what we have for Germans, they're kind of plentiful for that unit. But you go to Sword or Gold, you'd find a pittance in terms of those kind of, unofficial, some German with a camera that he brought with him, taking a few photos for his mates. There's not much of that stuff. Omaha has a little bit more than perhaps some, because of Franz Gockel, and although I'm with you, von Keusken's work is a little bit iffy. He did gather information, he did interview those people. There's a core value to the stuff he put together, even if I take some of his claims with a pinch of salt. And if you don't know what we're talking about, folks, he wrote a series of books. Only some of them are in English, some of them are in German, some of them in French, about the Widerstandsnest on Omaha Beach. He did one on Pointe du Hoc. He did one on, I think, 91st Luftlandedivision. Division. I think he did one on, or at least he covered Samurai Glees. But they're maybe 15 years old, I suppose, 20 years old.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when it comes to von Keusken's WN62 book, a lot of the photos that I showed in this of the Germans prior to D-Day are taken from his book. I think his photos are legit. A lot of those photos are legit. You can see, because you see lots of landmarks and such, and then you can recognize certain faces. And so that his collecting of names, I think, is accurate. The photos are accurate.
Yep.
His anecdotes is where it gets really weird, and it's like, what, because there are a number of things in the WN62 book where eventually, I just had to put it down. There's one part where he claims that the bell tower in Colleville was destroyed by a German with a Panzerfaust because French resistance were up there sniping Germans. I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? And then the whole thing I talked about with, Schnoll getting atomized by, 75 millimeter. It's stuff like that, where it's like, we have tons of other, documents that already have explanations for this stuff. That's not that. Look at the USS Harding is what blew up the bell tower in Colleville, and there's documents of that. Americans have, their own documents of it. It's in the ship's log, and so it's like, where is this even coming from? But
he did the same when he not that we're going down that rabbit hole again. But he did the same when he started messing about with the Sam Meriglees story and things like General Falley's death. He had this core sort of detail that he had pulled out, then he just seemed to just go down this. That doesn't sound exciting enough, so I'll just kind of make up something about, and you wonder why he did it. But like everybody else, he kind of has his place in historiography. But I look at it now and I go, there's some ropiness in there. What we need is Neil's new book is the one. Neil doesn't put it in unless it's a fact. And this is we're back to where we started with this, Mike. This idea of how much of a picture we're still building up about Omaha Beach, and yet actually, it matters to me and you, and it matters to those of us watching this program today. But actually, if you're reading a conventional kind of general narrative about Omaha Beach or D-Day, and there's a description of, and we moved up and took out some German bunkers, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, whether it has the the year that bunker was made, and whether it was the first one they had there or the second one they had there, or whether the trench had water in it or not in it. That kind of doesn't really matter, but it matters to people like us. I think
it does matter. Yeah, no, I've gotten that. I've met that. I've gotten that a lot, where it's like, well, who cares? It's like, well, I care, but absolutely. But and just one more thing too about von Kuskin. He also is to blame a lot for the Severlo stuff. That is also he's played a big role in that. But Franz Gockel's memoir, like a lot of the things that I think that I can trust that are in von Kuskin's WN62 book are in Franz Gockel's book. So it's like that's how I can kind of pick apart what I can trust. And Ludwig Pie, for example, is in Franz Gockel's book and such. But no, those things do matter. Those details do matter to me, and that's why I do artwork for this stuff as well. Not just research, but I like to do artwork to depict this stuff. And I haven't done any big landscape pieces on WN62 yet, but I eventually will. And but that's why I do stuff like that, because I do want people to get a better understanding of this history.
No, exactly. Well, Mike, we'll invite you back again to carry on. And they said in the sidebar they're going to crowdfund you a new microphone or something, which would be nice.
Thank you. I need that.
A little bit poppy, but the information was there, and that's what we appreciate. And yeah, it's just I sit there silent because I'm thinking he's going to pull another photo I haven't seen before yet, but I have not seen that one before. And then you're going to pull something in that photo that I've not noticed before, and I go, yeah, not noticed that before. And it's just that. I can't say it enough. The superlatives there. It's just, I'm studying what I'm studying for what I'm writing right now. But I'm trying to kind of take some lessons from you. Is bring that photo up in high resolution, just move across it back and forth, and see what you can see, and kind of make some comparisons. I play around with contrast, and I play around with things that just trying to kind of see something else reveals itself. But it's a never-ending quest, I suppose.
It certainly is. No, I like to treat this stuff like forensics sometimes, and dissecting every little thing possible. So yeah, I try and urge people, if you're going to put photos out there, make sure they're the best resolution that you can.
Yeah, more pixels required. So, Mike, great talking to you, folks. I'll be back again with Andrew May talking about 13th, 18th Hussars pushing off Sword Beach, and then 2 shows on Wednesday. We're looking at Royal Marines coming ashore on D-Day, and we've got other things coming your way. Click, like, and subscribe. Check out Mike's films online. Check out his other work online. And I will see you all again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye.